Welcome to Second City, a Chicago-centric podcast that takes a look at politics, current events, sports, and pop culture through the lens of liberty. I'm Jim Hume. Thanks for tuning in. The 2024 presidential race is in full swing. A multitude of candidates from the major parties, third parties, and independents have announced their intentions for the highest office of the land. Libertarians will also have a choice of seeking the party's nomination. As I've explained before, the LP does not have a state primary process. The presidential and vice presidential candidates will be selected at the party's national convention to be held in Washington, D.C. over Memorial Day weekend in 2024. My guest today is a former NYU professor, author of a dozen books, and one of those candidates looking to represent the Libertarian Party on the ballot next November, Michael Rectenwald. Michael, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Maybe tell us a little bit about your background, and I find your story to how you came into libertarianism to be kind of fascinating. So just maybe a quick synopsis of your background and how you got here.
Sure. Yes, as you pointed out, I'm the former NYU professor who took on the woke mob for free speech, and I'm the former Marxist turned radical libertarian, and I'm the author of 12 books, as you said. Most recently, The Great Reset and the Struggle for Liberty, but also Springtime for Snowflakes, Google Archipelago, Beyond Woke, and Thought Criminal. All of these written from a libertarian perspective. And I am seeking the nomination as a libertarian. And I've been endorsed by the likes of Dave Smith, Judge Napolitano, Walter Block, Jeff Deist, Keith Knight, and a whole host of other people. And of course, the Mises Caucus itself. So, yeah, I'm the way I got into libertarianism, I've talked about, but I can briefly touch on that here. When the left came for me, the woke mob, I should call them, they kind of opened my eyes to authoritarianism and slash totalitarianism, and that I had been affiliated with this for far too long, and I simultaneously rejected all of the left, inclusive of Marxists and the identitarians and all of that, in one fell swoop, and became a civil libertarian. And upon investigation and research, reading, exploration, and self-inspection, I came to become an economic and political libertarian. And then I, started to interview with various libertarian podcasts, Tom Woods, etc., many others. And I've been speaking for the Mises Institute at various events, including as the Ludwig von Mises Memorial Lecture and many other lectures for them. Been writing for them, podcasting for them, and also speaking for other liberty organizations around the country at numerous events, and have been championing libertarianism, or with a lowercase l, libertarian, for 7.5 years. And then I was asked by the Mises Caucus to run as president, and I was sort of surprised. But I, upon pondering the vision that they had for the campaign and my own personal commitments to liberty, I decided to do it. So the rest is ongoing history.
Would you say that was there a particular book or perhaps just piece that you might have read or come across that that light bulb went on for the kind of the libertarian movement? I know, I personally, I also, in college, I was pretty liberal, came from a political science background, and as I was involved in kind of at that time in the 1990s progressive politics, which was nothing compared to what it is now. I came across folks like F.A. Hayek, and really started to kind of change my view of government should be about. I don't know if there's anything in particular that kind of gave you that aha moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd say Mises was the main gateway for me. Let's call it the gateway drug. I started reading Mises, and particularly his book Socialism, an economic and sociological analysis, and then many other books by him, Human Action, of course, and several others. And also, at the same time, I was doing a lot of research into leftist political criminality and the Black Book of Communism and the Stalinist Digital Archive and many other sources reading about the Bolshevik Revolution and the revolution in China. And I started to see very, very similar symptoms in our own society to those particular revolutionary movements. And, I've become probably one of the most arch strongest arch critic of socialism. I would say I've written 5 books that have, in one way or another, critiqued and denounced socialism. And then I guess I got into I got into Rothbard, and by 2018 was already a anarcho-capitalist, and then Hoppe. And then, I've read a lot of other libertarian theorists like Bloch and Walter Bloch and several others. And of course, I kept up reading everything that comes out of the Mises Institute and LouRockwell.com and many other sources that have been fortifying and educative.
Yeah, that's great. It's it's just going to be kind of that progression from like Hayek to Mises to Rothbard to Hoppe, is just like the pyramid.
Yeah,
I would say.
yeah.
I watched a little bit of the debate over the weekend from South Carolina, with a number of other candidates for presidency that the LP candidates have assembled so far. And I thought that there was a lot kind of stuck on things like Social Security was a whole debate, and I didn't really get into a lot of the meat of the matter. And I think most of the libertarian candidates that choose from, the difference between them on a lot of these policies are razor thin or paper thin, at least. So my question would be, speaking only to libertarians now, what separates you from the other candidates that would make you the best messenger for the Libertarian Party come November?
Yeah, there's a couple things. First of all, just speaking of my personal attainments and access to media, I've had the greatest reach by far. I have the greatest reach into milieus outside of the Libertarian Party per se, inclusive of the Liberty Movement, but inclusive of other contingents that the other candidates don't have access to. For example, I'll have a course coming out from Hillsdale College that'll reach 6 million people in the early spring. I've been on Tucker Carlson many times. I've been on, even though it's a neocon news channel, I've been on every show on Fox News from the early morning through the late night. So that's one thing. And the second thing that really distinguishes me is is that I am an educator. And thirdly, I think, is that I understand where most of the country is, and where people, where their values come from, and the premises that they take for granted. And I've demolished those premises in my own work, and I'm able to articulate what those premises are and why they're false. And thirdly, I think that I'm the only candidate representing full scale, full throttle, the decentralized revolution campaign. And that is the localization and decentralization, nullification. My campaign is about seizing power from wresting power from the central government and positing it in the people at the local level. And so I'm not promising, like some of the other candidates, X percentage of the electoral vote, spending X amount of dollars, getting an electoral college victory here or there, and then getting on TV for that. I think that these are secondary to the real mission of the Libertarian Party, which is to expand liberty for the people. And so this is, I think, the best means for doing so. And that is localization, decentralization. And so I'm not telling any fibs about what's possible. I will get, though, the widest reach of any candidate. And so I will reach a wider audience than any of the others. But I'm not going to do it just to usher myself in as the white knight who rides into DC and fixes things. That's not possible either, even if I could win. And it's not possible given the stature of the party relative to the major parties, the dominant parties, and the political sphere as it exists right now.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of things we talk about as libertarians, as far as ending the Fed and eliminating the IRS and income tax. And these are all great things to talk about. The reality is that even if a libertarian was elected president, you would need majority libertarian Congress to even start to get any of these things done. But the important thing, I think, is, like you said, is being able to convey that message to to folks that aren't as familiar with some libertarian policy, and getting local libertarians elected is super important. I think if people see libertarians on their city council and their their town boards and county boards and things like that, that's going to go a long way for sure. Maybe kind of continuing on that train of thought, any ideas or strategy for kind of helping down ballot candidates to kind of win some of those elections, or at least prop them up in some of these local races?
Yeah, well, we'll be fighting for ballot access in various regions and localities, and we'll also be fighting for those candidates to promote them and to promote their candidacy, to actually help them. Like I helped local candidates here in this last election, and I will be helping them in the next election and the election after that. So getting material aid and manpower to these people is very essential. And so I plan on leading by example. And the other thing is, I think, is getting this message out more broadly through the media will help stress the importance of winning these local elections and wresting power from the feds at the local level. And so that's another aspect of it. It's kind of an education tour. It's a media tour, and it's a decentralization campaign message tour.
Yeah, that that sounds. I think that's definitely needed right now. I think just the other day we had Nikki Haley right after that GOP debate and was talking about wanting to make sure that every social media profile is like registered and has a name behind it, and walked it back a little bit. But I immediately thought of some of the stuff you wrote in Google Archipelago, and how the kind of the tech and media is really being used as a tool of and there's been a lot of kind of pushback against some of the things that happened with like the 2020 election, and of course the COVID actions, disinformation, information being defined and suppressed by entities unnaturally, perfectly, and then to see the big kind of the pushback from normally the right side of the spectrum on all that, to hear her say something like this, just show that neither side is really interested in uh, in open communication. Both sides are just there to control the narrative to their viewpoint.
Yeah, they're both authoritarians, and they both want to institute more statism, more centralized control. Nikki Haley's comment really goes to the heart of digital control vis-a-vis digital identity, which I've written about in The Great Reset and the Struggle for Liberty. Digital identity is a way of tracking, tracing, and surveilling individuals from cradle to grave. And having a verified digital identity to go online is the first step towards digital tyranny that they want to impose. So she's actually this is kind of like a wolf in wolf's clothing in her case, and everything that she wants to do first, and then also, of course, her policies on war. She's a total war hawk, a complete neocon, and so this person, I mean, this is where they're pushing to. This is what they're pushing. She's getting all this airtime. I understand. I don't watch these shows, but I understand she's getting all kind of airtime all over the place, and they're trying to usher this in. So this is a disaster, but the establishment is behind her.
Yeah, she seems to be the candidate du jour lately, for whatever reason that might be. You brought up some of the kind of the neocon war hawk rhetoric coming out that has been kind of exasperated with the current conflict between Israel and Hamas. And again, I find it interesting how so many of these former neocons, they have one opinion on the Ukraine war. This is here's the Democrats' war, and so the Republicans have to kind of be opposed to it. But as soon as the Republicans are gain power, then they have their own wars. Neither party is anti-war.
Right.
They just want to champion their own wars, and whether we've seen what happened between the two President Bushes, and Clinton had his own wars with the breakup of the former Yugoslavia, and of course the ongoing conflict in Israel and Palestine. How can we portray this message of anti-war and peace to the American people, that neither party is in bringing peace in the world?
Well, I think we got to make it clear to them that, in fact, these wars are actually enslaving them. That they're actually becoming enslaved by these wars, thanks to the kind of money that's being spent and the interest that's being accrued on the money that's being printed to fund these wars, and that we are enabling, in the case of the Gaza Strip and even the West Bank, as I understand it somewhat now, we're enabling atrocities, frankly, and our money is being used. Now, this is very difficult to get across because, for some reason, these people, even these Christians, and I happen to be a Christian myself, but I cannot believe the extent to which the Christian right has become fanatical in their determination to wipe out a whole people. I find it just utterly disgusting and repulsive and anti-Christian, frankly. And I'm trying to fight them on those terms, and also on the terms of the anti-statist position, and that we really, libertarians, as Murray Rothbard put it, should be neutral with reference to war in terms of funding material aid and so forth. But he also said that there is it's not enough to do that. We have to actually investigate the various incidences of war, and we do need to be able to come down on the side of right, where the most wrong in the cases of war. Which state is the most wrong? Who is actually doing the greatest destruction? Which has the greater war guilt? I think that's the fact that he called it war guilt in the Middle East. And he said this elsewhere as well. So the point is that we need to appeal to them in any way possible, including, appealing to their so-called values, but also to the principles of, anti-statism, and why statism is causing all of these crises, and that it's robbing them in order to undertake these escapades, these onslaughts, and that we're really risking World War III here in this case. And certainly nobody would want that unless they're looking at it as the eschaton that they seek. So it is a difficult battle, but that's where the cultural battle has to go on. We still need to fight a cultural battle for libertarianism. It isn't enough to win, to worry about the political battle. That's one part of it. But in order to win the political battle or start gaining traction in it, we need to win on the cultural level. And that's where we have to take it on in every facet.
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot from libertarians here within our own party that we need to kind of stay out of the culture wars. But I mean, if you're looking to kind of change the minds and the hearts and the souls of the American people, then that goes right to changing culture.
Yes. I mean, I'm sorry, you were saying more?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about engaging in these ridiculous culture wars that the state is actually propagating itself. They're actually initiating these culture wars, partly as a distraction, partly as a kind of team gotcha type politics back and forth, and constantly looking to turn the attention of the American public against their supposed political enemies rather than them, right? So we need to fight a cultural battle that's against the state, against statism. That's the cultural wars we need to be in.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's for sure. Some other events here. I'm here in Chicago, and pretty much the biggest issue over the past several months has been this large influx of asylum seekers, immigrants, illegal aliens. I mean, whatever. There's a lot of terms being used. We'll say asylum seekers is it's kind of the the politically correct term that's bandied about. And here in Chicago, many years ago, as kind of into some of the more strict immigration policies that were being talked about, they declared themselves a sanctuary city, and are and have welcomed anyone who wants to come here. and obviously, other governors, Governor of Texas in particular, Abbott has said, well, if that's the case, we'll send them to you. Immigration, pretty tough issue. I know there's lots of open border libertarians. There's libertarians that see borders as property rights. Maybe spend a little time here on this kind of tricky issue of immigration.
Sure. Well, here's another issue about which neither of the major parties has a principled position. One of them apparently wants to, import as many people into the country as possible to ingratiate them to itself. That's the Democrats. They want to ingratiate this large influx of immigrants to themselves, thereby assuring their political power and also increasing the welfare statism of the country. They do the same thing with, welfare with domestic population. And this is a way of ingratiating these people to the state and making them statists and welfareists. And so we have the perfect storm right now. And then the other side is just kind of like the Republican side is kind of like you can construe some of their hostility towards immigrants in terms of ethnic chauvinism and sort of protectionism that is not exactly principled. It's just like, keep these people out. This is our country and things like that. So what is my position? It's a principled one. It's not open borders. I don't believe that's the true proper libertarian position. The proper libertarian position starts from the premise of property. And so you put this out there already, but the idea is that under a total private property society, the only borders that we would have that would exist would be the borders around people's property. And so the thing is, then it's complicated by the question of so-called public property or state property, quote unquote. Now, I argue that the so-called state property is actually the property of taxpayers. And likewise, just as you would require an invitation onto private property to enter it, you need an invitation onto so-called state or public property, which let's rename it citizen property. And so my argument is that we need to have an invitation-only immigration process. Now, this sounds draconian, but it actually can be quite liberal in the sense that if you have an invitation, say, from a corporation or a property holder, a spouse, a family member, and they're citizens, and they will vouch for you and also assume legal liability and financial liability for your being here, then you would be invited and you'd be admitted. And so that has to happen through a vetting process naturally, and through ports of entry. And I think we need more of them and to streamline the ports of entry. So it's actually a very liberal position, but it is based on a strict property rights perspective. And I think that open borders is actually a violation of the NAP, of the non-aggression principle.
Yeah, that's definitely. I take that does involve some type of system of government or some type of state entity to kind of process these immigrants as they arrive. So yeah, there's to me I see the whole issue as a complete failure of government on pretty much every level, from the interference the economies and governments of these Central American countries, to not having a comprehensive immigration plan or policy, to local governments declaring themselves sanctuary cities without any type of plan. So it's obviously having all these layers of government is not working for immigration. So
yes. I do
having
want to.
yeah.
I do want to speak to this issue about interference in these other countries and trade embargoes and faux trade agreements, which we don't, the free trade, unfettered free trade would mitigate many of these problems to the point where immigration would be much less of an issue, if at all. So
Yes. Mhm.
that's the problem. And interference in other states, interference in their governments, and effectively debasing their economic structures by virtue of embargoing or putting tariffs on their products and all that. This is the problem that causes all these people to leave. I mean, most people, I'm sort of generalizing, but most people want to live where they, in the country of their birth. They're not coming here because they hate their localities so much as they have no opportunity there. So increasing trade and allowing free trade would give them opportunities where they are. Yes, they would make less money there, but they'd also need less money there. So cost of living is a very relative thing. And this right now, what we're doing is the Biden administration in particular, and then the Trump administration. I'll leave that for a second. But the Biden administration seems to be just intent on flooding the country with unvetted immigrants who are also, some of them, drug and child traffickers. So this is not what we want, and this isn't an anti-immigrant stance. It's a stance that protects the property rights of people and allows for immigration on a rational property rights premise.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember the Cuban immigration wave from the 80s, where here we had a group of immigrants that were kind of fleeing a despotic government, but at the same time, Castro kind of used that to empty their prisons, send a lot of their problem population to the United States, and we have very well documented evidence of the problems that caused in places like South Florida with excessive gang violence and uptick in violent crime. So I kind of see a little reminiscent from what's going on now with some of the folks coming in from Venezuela. And again, I'm sure it's not most of them. It's a small percentage. There are a lot of families, a lot of children, a lot of women, but at the same time, this is a tactic that's been used by these countries before, and I don't think anyone's really paying too much attention to that particular issue. Well, I guess only time will tell and see what happens in that aspect.
Yeah. I think that's true. That has happened, and I think that we're actually creating a humanitarian catastrophe here by letting all these people in with nothing to catch them. No opportunities really. There's people living on the streets in New York City. I mean, laying on the ground. This is certainly no reception for anybody that no human being deserves. So I think that we need to be the humanitarian thing to do is actually to vet people and to have them come vis-a-vis an invitation. And as I said, this can be very liberal in a real sense, in the real sense of the term liberal, not leftist, but yeah, liberal.
Yeah, the other irony I find too, they were just talking about this here in Chicago, is so all these immigrants that have entered the country, well, they can't legally work. They need permission from the government in order to get a job, to cut hair, to do anything that might get them off the streets, off the sidewalks. They have them housed in police stations here in Chicago. They can't do anything because the government is preventing them from actually going out and earning money and making it or not. So it just again, it's just kind of shows the systematic failure on kind of all levels of the problems caused by having to have government permission to travel to work and all these other things are just exasperate what's going on right now.
Yeah, and a government ID program would only exacerbate that, and would allow them to allow the state to discriminate against anybody, not just
Mhm.
immigrants. So if we need an ID to, government ID to be able to work, that's a total disaster. So we don't want that. So we got to watch out for all these backdoor mechanisms by which the state tries to exert its power.
Yeah, and then they're very well known for taking a crisis like this and using it to their advantage to implement more government, to implement larger government, to implement larger, more bureaucracy, to take away or reduce our rights. So that's another thing that concerns me about when enough people on both sides are clamoring for a solution. You have to be careful what what you're really asking for, because
Yes.
track record shows that things like Homeland Security and Social Security, even all of these are problems we have now because people demanded action.
Mhm.
And
Look at Ramaswamy. He sounds like a renegade in some areas, but he wants to have a war, literally send troops to the Mexican border. He wants to have a war with the cartels on the border. I mean, that's just an unbelievable proposal, and shows you just how crazy these people are.
it is. It's I mean, it's like having declaring war on terror. You're going to go fight some terrorists in some country that they're not even a government. They're not even an organized. They're not an organized. And you're gonna go to war with them. And look how the war on terror has worked out. It's been a huge disaster. And you're really talking about the exact same thing, other than it being way closer to home.
Yeah, totally. So you're putting it in our backyard, if not, in our doorstep. And that's just an outrageous proposal, which doesn't solve the problem, only exacerbates it and creates, a really hostile, I think really a hostile culture, because this would spread to the cities. This would spread north. This could end. Well, we can only imagine where it would go, but it's not good.
Oh yeah, I mean, the United States has certainly been fortunate that for 150 years or so we've had pretty friendly relations with our neighbors. Yeah, that would definitely be the worst thing possible for sure.
Right.
Kind of going back to talking about the decentralization and kind of getting control away from Washington D.C. and getting it a little bit closer to home. What are some things that you see that could be real ways that local governments can kind of push back against some of this tyranny or uh, uh, overstepping authority of the federal government? What are some things that local governments could do that could kind of be a response to that?
Well, let's look back at COVID and what some localities tried to do and some did. Not that many, but what more could have done in the case of the COVID mandates is just totally, refuse them and refuse the policies and not institute these recommended CDC, FDA policies that destroyed the economies and ruined millions and millions of businesses and ran up the deficit and caused the printing of all this money, which is causing all this interest, which has caused a great deal of interest rate climb. And so, imagine if we just, ignored them. And when there's no compliance at the local level, the policies become moot. And we have the right through the 10th Amendment to nullify unconstitutional laws and mandates. there's nothing that says you can enforce these mandates and laws if they're nullified by the states and even at the local level. So I think that's all possible through nullification and just absolute non-compliance and just a complete indifference, if not hostility, to the federal mandates and the recommendations.
Yeah, that's and I think you can kind of boil that down even further, where local governments can nullify even perhaps state laws. And
Mm-hmm.
here in Illinois, we just had this assault weapons ban that was put into effect or voted by the legislature back in January. There were a number of county sheriffs that came out and said, "Look, we're not really gonna bother with enforcement of this." Um, um, and so that's maybe another example of just how a local having libertarians in your local government go a long way in trying to preserve some of those liberties.
Yes, indeed.
Um,
It doesn't even have to be libertarians with an large L. I should
sure.
state. I don't care what. It could be independents. It could be Democrats, which is doubtful. But in any case, they just need to be lowercase libertarians, and then we would be able to vote on those people at the local level. People would be able to vote on them, and but to do that, to even win these elections, we must undertake a cultural battle for liberty and getting the message of liberty across to these people. We're going to create more libertarians.
What would be the most maybe 2 or 3 talking points that you would most want to get across to non-libertarians or people that are just looking into libertarianism to kind of get them to see our side a little more clearly?
Okay, well, like on what issue? I would start with issues, right? I would start with issues, and instead of like trying to get into like abstract principles, people like apparently to deal with concrete issues and then infer the principles from there, rather than having the principles kind of like imposed. So like on any number of issues, like just the idea of free speech, the importance of free speech and the essential character of it. I would start with the idea that, look, you have a right over your body, you own it, and you should be able to use it in ways that you want to, without, as long as you're not harming somebody, as long as you're not violating their rights, as long as you're not aggressing on them, on their selves or their property. And so free speech would be one issue that I would approach it at. Bodily autonomy would be another. You have the right over your body and what you put in it, and there's no right of the state to impose any kind of mandates over that. So, like COVID would be a great example of how the government tried to coerce people into taking a vaccine that they many people didn't want. Now, listen, if you want to take the vaccine, go right ahead. But if you don't want to, you should have a perfect right not to. And you do have a perfect right not to. So things like that, I would approach it from an issue-based standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. Just it's a little easier for people to kind of grasp things that are more concrete, I guess, than
Yeah.
I know as libertarians we love to
we love abstractions. Yeah,
we love abstract but that doesn't resonate with the average person usually. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Anything else there you want to maybe get out to my listeners, to libertarians that might be tuning in? Any kind of messages you want across and regarding your campaign for the LP nomination?
Sure. I mean, listen, I want to wreck the regime, but I can't do this alone. This is not a Michael Rectenwald wrecking the regime. The wrecking of the regime will happen from the ground up by you and not by me. So we need to enlist people into this campaign, which is more than a campaign. It's a movement. It's a movement of decentralization, localization, and personal liberty. So come on to my website, get involved, get involved as a volunteer, a delegate, a donor. We could certainly use donations. You can go to Rectenwald 2024, or if it's easier to remember, wrecktheregime.com. It'll take you to the same place.
Great.
And get on board the wrecking ball machine.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm all in for the decentralized concept, and the being able to kind of change direction from the top down is impossible. And
It's impossible.
It is impossible. So getting involved locally. I'm involved here in the Libertarian Party of Chicago. I've for Cook County Board again, and these are just ways of getting that message out to a small group that hopefully kind of takes it out.
Spreads.
Yeah.
Let me add one thing. You mentioned the Fed. Since we can't eradicate the Fed with one fell swoop, we can erode its power over the monopoly over money by using parallel currencies, by using alternate currencies like Bitcoin, like gold, like silver, like Monero, like whatever your network will accept. And I'm not going to adjudicate the various possible currencies. It's really up to you and the people that you exchange goods with.
Yeah. Ignoring the Fed instead of
ignore them and erode their power by simply using other currencies. So the fiat currency doesn't have the power over you that it does. And you should get involved in this soon before they implement a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, in which case, if you don't have alternatives set up and a network with which to exchange this alternative parallel currency, you're going to get sucked into the CBDC and everything that involves, which is total surveillance over you.
Correct. And it's like you're not going to have a choice. So it's it's best to kind of prepare now.
Yes, that is. Yep.
Great. Again, thanks for coming on. I hope to talk to you again soon. I love to have you kind of next time you're in the area, come to Chicago and talk to some of the folks here. And we'd love to have you. But again, Michael, thanks a lot. I appreciate you coming on the podcast, and let's stay in touch and kind of follow up and see how the campaign's coming along.
Thanks so much, Jim. Great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
And thank all of you for joining me. If you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button to stay updated on the latest episodes. If you're tuning in through Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favorite podcast app, click follow to stay in the loop. You can also follow me on Twitter at Second City Liberty. That's the number 2, ND City Liberty. Check out my website, www.secondcityliberty.com. And if you have an idea for the show or a guest that you would like to see appear on the podcast, shoot me an email, jim@secondcityliberty.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay strapped, and stay based.